we have phone messages? What's this here?
I wanted to mention that today is Friday. I think it's very educational session.
(6:31), and we will call the Regional School Committee to order. And given that we have a remote participant, we'll go around and see if we are present. Sarah?
Present. Is this
Bridget?
on? Present.
Jennifer?
Present.
William?
Present.
Anna?
Present.
Deb?
Present.
Tillman?
Present.
Irv?
Present.
And Sarah Vest present. Okay. So, our first and only matter of business tonight is to discuss the FY25 Regional Capital and Operating Budget for discussion and vote. And we will not have public comment tonight because we, as a committee, have a lot of work to do and a lot of discussion to have, and I want to make sure we have enough time to do that. And I greatly appreciate all of the public comment that has happened over the last couple of weeks. Who've come in to visit us or left us voicemails, and emails. So thank you all very much, and we've heard all of it. But we have a lot of hard work to do. So, that being said, happy Pi Day. Let's talk about some numbers. Yes.
Okay.
We're going to have Doug present some information for us.
Good evening. I'm going to share a very similar document to what was available last time, but I will show you what's different about it and talk through that piece. So the beginning of this document, and I'm sorry that this didn't get attached to the agenda until just before the meeting. I was almost ready to put it up, and then I got stuck in meetings all afternoon, so I didn't get a chance to double check the last numbers and post it, but I'll walk you through it. It has a similar format to what we've experienced in the past, and so let me not start on page 7. So the first part of this is exactly the same as you saw on Tuesday night. So this beginning section, let me go to the very beginning and walk you through. So this beginning section, this is exact same beginning to the document that was available to you on Tuesday night. So this is the sort of consolidated expenditure plan on page 1. On page 2 is the full roster of adjustments and reductions that we were talking about at length on Tuesday, as they were on Tuesday, with a total reduction of $1,689,871 to get ourselves in balance with our available revenues. This is the assessment method with the 4% guardrails involved, and that's part of how we came to that reduction level of $1,689,000. So this is all from last Tuesday. So this hasn't changed. And then this consolidated spending plan. Then we have the actual motion language with the guardrail. So the assessment method is one piece that you have to approve and send to the towns for the purpose of budget approval. Then the actual budget itself with the assessments attached. This is, again, all the same as it was on Tuesday night. And so this, starting on page 5, is adjusted relative to your request from Tuesday night to say if we wanted to put back all of those teaching and student-facing positions, what would the budget look like? What would the increases to each of the communities look like, et cetera? So what we have here on this is the consolidated spending plan, and so in those, so one thing I will orient you to on this is a little different than how you've seen this before. This is proposed. This is where we started for the level services before we did anything with regard to additions, reductions, adjustments, or anything. So that's that column. That's the one that you saw on the 23rd of January, I believe it was. This adjusted column is essentially applying all of those adjustments and reductions, and so, you know, you see that, for example, let me see if I can find a good example, central administration, it's a much smaller number here because of the changes in salaries related to central office and that. And so differences that you see between these two columns reflect things that are on, which will, you know, the sheet that I'll show you in just a moment, which is, and this continues through the rest of this. And so one thing I'll point out is two things. One thing in particular is this number here, the $35,748,545 is roughly a million, a little less than $1 million more than what was on those previous pages. I'll get into that detail in just a moment. When we go into the adjustments, I left everything on here and just adjusted things to zero them out. So for example, these changes to our teaching staff, restructuring, paraeducators, teaching staff and paraeducators, we made those FTE changes zero, which made the dollar amount zero. And so the total here, and the other one that got adjusted was the staff turnover, because with a lot fewer staff turnover, the amount of sort of recoupment for staff turnover goes way, way down. And so the target now becomes $747,896. And so that's, you know, a significant difference from 1.6 or so. And then here on this page is where we show how the assessments have changed. And so what I did in this circumstance is, again, this has got the same sort of format. We start with that same $36,496,441, which is level services, minus the $500,000 for ESSER funds, the application of our known sources of funds other than assessment money, and then a sort of, you know, and using our assessment method, what the assessments would look like in that regard. And then what I did is I tuned the guardrail in order to end up with an adjustment that matched our target. So we knew if I put back these things, the difference between where we started at 1.6 in far as cuts goes down to whatever it was I said there a moment ago. It's about $747,896 less. And what is the need in regard to a guardrail that would get us there? So it applies the assessment method as far as calculating each town's assessment relative to our methodology of using 5 years rolling average of minimum local contribution and the 5-year rolling average of students. And so that's how we get to a budget of $35,748,545. And then reflected here is a consolidated spending plan, and then what follows is the actual motion language. And so, you know, in the assessment method, the 4% becomes 8.2. The rest of it reads exactly the same. In this one, the assessments are changed and the total dollar amount is changed relative to that. And the remainder of this document is the capital, the capital assessment for borrowing that's already happened, and then the proposed debt authorization for new projects that need to work in the coming year. So that's the quick Cliff Notes version of what's in this document. I think the critical points to note are, from an assessment standpoint, we're more than doubling for 3 of the communities and roughly tripling for Shutesbury, the assessment from the current year, or doubling what we had projected in the previous one. I shouldn't say from the current year. It's 8.2% above the current year, but it's double the increase, more than double the increase for the assessments relative to what we have if we use the number from Tuesday night. But from the standpoint of what that means on our additions and reductions is all of these teaching and student-facing positions have been returned to the budget. So I think I'll stop there and let people ask questions or what you guys want to know or see.
Okay. Tillman?
I I just want to make sure that people understood what you just said, which was the doubling and tripling.
Right.
It's the increase that
It's the
doubles and
increase.
triples. It's not the
Right,
total
not-
assessment.
Correct.
just So
I misspoke. It was,
Yeah,
it is the, increase in the assessment is twice what, more than twice what it was on Tuesday relative to making a larger cut of 1.6.
Right, but it's a 4.2% additional increase over last year. So it's not, yeah, just to put it in proportion. I have an intuitive question. So on page 7, at the very top, for level services, it says 8.29% increase.
Yes.
And what I'm trying to understand is, now we're talking about an assessment increase of around 8.2%, which is roughly the same, but we still have to make cuts.
Right.
Can you explain what other things are there that cause us to still have to make cuts?
What I would suggest is part of that is that the assessments don't scale linearly.
But they're all the same, so it doesn't matter, right? It's a weighted average across the towns, but they all
It's
increase
not.
by 8 point.
Their increase is the same, but the percentage of the total is not the same. Do you know what I mean? In other words, the burden that a given town bears changes slightly between years. So if we were to say, if we look at Amherst at 17,772,017 for the current fiscal year, that percentage of the total of 21 million is not the same in fiscal 24, fiscal 25, that's different. So that skews the revenue generating from the assessment.
So let's look at the line that says assessment required, which doesn't have the towns in it. So it's
Right.
just that is 8.2% increase.
Right, no, well, the assessment required is actually 11.62% higher.
Right, that's what I'm trying to understand. So why do we need a assessment increase to get true level services? Why do we need an assessment increase that is more than 8.29%, which is the top line increase of the budget?
Do you have an answer, Sarah?
Possibly because there are other sources of revenue. It's not only the assessment.
And the only one that sorry, can I ask a follow-up
Yes.
question? The only ones that I see that have non-zero percentages in the third column are charter reimbursement, which is 9%, so let's say that's roughly the same, right?
Right.
And then there's the transportation reimbursement, which is 18.75, which is much larger, but that increase only adds up to 150,000, so it's not
Right.
a huge portion of the budget. So I'm
So
still,
the total revenue there, so total revenue last year, so that's a combination of Chapter 70 plus all those other sources. So last year was 11,825,056. This year it's 12,075,627. That only went up 2.12%, as opposed to the budget going up 8.29. So the support from other sources as a percentage of the total is less. That's why the burden gets borne by the town. So it shift the cost. So if you think about it, in the current year, the pie is let's say 50-50, and half is, other sources and half assessment. As we shift to 25,
got it.
the percentage of the other sources is smaller.
Yep, okay,
So that's what shifts it a little bit.
thank you.
Working that math. Sorry.
I have no question.
Do you have, Irv?
Doug, could you go back to the bottom where you had all of the assessments for each town? Not that one, further down, I
Oh,
think.
where that's actually here, that one?
There you go.
Yep.
All right, so when I look at that, I said that's $19,229,322 for Amherst. And I know it's in there, but it ran past me, is what is the increase that Amherst will face and all the other towns will face if we do this budget submission, i.e. if it's 19,229 and 322 for Amherst for this iteration of the budget, what does that increase look like? Is, you know, what amount of dollars are we talking? And that would go for Leverett,
Yeah.
Pelham, Dewsbury, et cetera.
So hopefully, so this is the numbers that, for the current year. So the increase to get to that 19 is 1,457,305.
And that's for Amherst.
That's for Amherst. And that's
And
8.2% higher
that's
than
an
the
existing-
current
All
year.
right, good.
Point of order. I think Irv might be asking how the new number is different from the original number, not from last year's number. So if you go back to page 4,
Right.
this is the, right, oh, sorry, a little down. The motion, oh, okay, well, those
Right, 'cause
numbers
it's
are there.
710.
Yeah. Oh, no, but I think Irv was asking about the 18.4 here, the $18,482,922 in the Amherst line.
Right.
That's the original assessment amount for Amherst. The new assessment amount for Amherst is 19.2 million.
Is that the new one, Doug? Because that in your chart down below wouldn't indicate that. In other words, Jennifer is saying that that $18 million is, or $1.8 million is different.
So let me explain it this way. So, sorry, I'm
No, go ahead.
scrolling here. So the assessment in the current year is, for Amherst, we'll just do Amherst, is 17,772,017, which is this number here. And so when we talk about an increase from the previous year, that's the basis that we're starting from. So when we do a 4%, which is where we started on Tuesday night and requires almost $1.7 million in cuts, the increase to Amherst takes it up to the 18 million and change. If we have the proposal for tonight that I brought to you is only cutting about just under $800,000, so roughly half the amount of cuts. And so that requires Amherst to go to the 19 million number. And so the total increase from last year is almost twice as much as we were talking about. It's more than twice what it was when we were talking about the cuts on Tuesday night.
All right, so, yeah,
Irv,
so
are you
so I'm
asking-
assuming that goes for Pelham, Leverett, and Shrewsbury also.
That's right. So actually, Shrewsbury is more than twice. It's almost 3 times what it was, because for Amherst, Pelham, and Leverett, they were at the 4% limit, and so going to 8 is just a little over double. Going to 8.2 is a little over doubling what the increase was. But for Shrewsbury, they were at, I want to say, 2.52, and so it almost triples their increase from what we were talking about on Tuesday night.
All right, thank you.
Bridget?
Just to chime in on this, I also understood Irv's question to be the difference between the original budget that we were asked to vote on, which is on page 4 at the bottom, with Amherst of 18,482, and the other towns at different points on the $1 million mark. And the one that is on page, I'm getting to it, on page 8, and I think what is important for the vote tonight, we're not asked, obviously it was going to increase in both cases, but what's the additional amount we're asking of the towns not to make these cuts? So,
So
you know, just eyeballing it, I think it's like 800,000 for Amherst or somewhere, 770.
746.
Yeah,
I'll change
thank
where I'm
you.
sharing, because I can tell you exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Because I have that.
Thank you, Doug.
I didn't put it on the chart, but I did do that calculation. So, I'll make this a little bigger, and see how that looks on the,
Oh,
on
yeah,
the,
thanks.
on the other. So make sure it's showing up large enough on the, not really, I'll make it bigger. I'll make sure it shows up a little bit bigger on the. So I'll scroll down just a little bit. So you see, here's the 8.2, and that's the total increase. This set of numbers is where we were on Tuesday night, this 18,482, 1,045,000, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the difference between between these two numbers, right? So Amherst is going up from the one set of cuts to where we are now, 710,905. Pelham, 40,215. Leverett, 61,640. Shrewsbury, 39,332. That's the increase from the previous, and that totals.
Sorry, Doug. I think it's this column, the 746, that's the difference between those two.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you.
No problem.
Wrong difference. Yeah, it's this group, which is totals 941,975. So it's a little less than $1 million of additional revenue that we're asking each of the towns to come up with.
So Doug, looking at that, the 746,401 for Amherst would be an additional, would add up to what amount for Amherst that Amherst would be looking at contributing on this budget?
The 19,245.
So this number of 19 million is the total that we're gonna ask for from them. This is the total increase from the current year. And then this number, the 746, is the increase relative to the conversation Tuesday night with $1.6 million in cuts.
What I'm trying to say is, what is the bottom line number that Amherst will be required to pay under this new budget scenario, where we're going beyond level services? What is that bottom line?
It's the highlighted numbers right here, the 19,229,322 for Amherst and Pelham, Leverett, Shrewsbury.
And that 19,229 represents what, $1,457,305?
That's the increase from the current year, is the 1,457,000 is the increase from the current year's assessment.
All right, so
Last
one more
follow-up,
time.
Irv.
How much will Amherst be asked to pay under this budget scenario?
19,229,322.
Which is an increase of how much?
It's from the current year. It's an increase of 8.2%, or 1,457,305.
All right, so it's 8.2% for Amherst.
Right.
And for the rest, and for Pelham and Leverett and Shrewsbury, what are those numbers? Increases, percent increases?
Irv, we have to have someone else ask questions also.
But
I understand. I just want to get to the bottom of this, and then
Yeah.
we got time. If we all want to discuss this and get our questions answered, then we must be patient with each other as we go through this.
right,
Yeah.
the percentage increase for every community under this method is 8.2%. So
All right,
all
thank
four
you.
communities are maxed out at 8.2% to meet this number.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Irv. Deb, did you have the next?
Yeah, just in the back and forth between Irv and Doug, I thought I heard a reference to this being a level services budget. Is that what you said, Irv? Because it's not. It's still
No, I
cutting.
didn't say, I said this is an increase from the level services budget. What is it?
It's
And
not
that's
an
what we're
increase
talking
from the
about,
level
an increase
services.
From the
It's,
level services budget.
it's
Which was
not.
the original budget that was presented to us.
It's not, is what I'm saying. My understanding is it's still a decrease in services. It's just not decreasing as much.
Correct.
I guess what I'm saying is Doug presented a level services budget to us.
Yeah, that was the
Originally.
36
It was
million.
a level services budget. Is that correct, Doug, or is I'm incorrect?
No, that's incorrect. So it's in, what I presented was,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
the deviation from level
I'm incorrect. I'm
services.
incorrect. You presented to us the budget that represented an increase in the level services budget. Which was presented to the town. So I'm corrected. Thank you.
Irv, level services mean we're having the exact same services next year as we have this year, which means no cuts.
Sarah, I understand that, and I already said that I misspoke.
Okay. Anna?
So, one way of allocating the extra million would have been to allocate it the way the budget allocations generally go. And this one just brings everybody up to the same increase. So Shutesbury ends up paying a lot more of the increase than everybody else. And so I'm gonna get some pushback when I go back to my finance committee, and they're gonna say, why do we have to make up all of the difference more than the other communities do?
May I?
Yep.
So what I would suggest to you is this, is that, so if we were to not have any guardrails whatsoever, and we wanted this level of service, this set of numbers here would be what the increases are. So it would be 10.89 and 20% for Pelham and 15.75% increase over the current year for Leverett, and Shutesbury would go to 10.46. And so that's the actual assessment method pre-guardrails. That's what everybody would owe to meet this. And when we do it
Yeah.
previously.
But if you had done the first budget the way it was.
Right,
But then you added the extra million according to the allocations, not the original budget, just the extra 1 million.
right.
How would that look?
So the thing is that doesn't apply the assessment method we've agreed to distribute the costs. In other words, when we apply guardrails, let's say we apply the 4% guardrails, those that are under 4% hold their assessment the same as it had been.
Yeah.
And then the others are limited, and then the burden of that is in reductions as opposed to being shared between the other communities. And so what we've done here is, because the amount needed is so much above the guardrails, I basically took guardrails off and said, all right, using our assessment method, what do we have? And then essentially applying guardrails until we got to, the level of reductions that matched with or excluded the ones that were that extra million.
I do
So-
get that, but then it's still, Shutesbury's contribution towards the total budget is higher than the allocation that it would have received.
Correct.
And that's gonna be a pushback.
And yeah, no, I understand that. And the thing is that, the reverse way to think of it is when we apply the 4% guardrails, the a proportion of the assessment borne by those towns at that guardrail is less than it should be. So in
Yeah.
that circumstance, whereas Shutesbury's is holding steady, in this circumstance, because everybody needs to go above that level, everybody ends up on the same place as far as apportioning the cost.
Sarah, did you have your hand up?
Not right now.
Tillman?
Thank you. Let me make an argument for Shutesbury, because I can see that this is a huge problem for this town, and the absolute amount that they're contributing is relatively small, and I'm trying to balance the risk of everything failing here versus getting a little bit extra out of Shutesbury. If the assessment method was rewritten that the guardrail was 8.2%, right? And you would design a budget that is just, let's say, $50,000 less than what you would get if everybody paid 8.2% more. That 50,000 would come off Shutesbury because they're the last one to hit the guardrail. That's exactly what we've done back when Amherst had 3%, right? We targeted this and then we got to 4%, and so depending on how we phrase the new guardrail, we could do the same thing and effectively increase Shutesbury contribution by an increase that is the same proportion as or additional increase that's the same proportion as what the other towns are experiencing between Tuesday and today.
Right.
4.2
and-
percentage points.
And to do that, then the other three towns would have to bear the burden, because we have to get the same sort of total. So they're gonna have to carry, percentages. Their guardrails then become something like 8.35 or
No.
8 point,
We're
know.
gonna cut the budget by that amount. We could do that too, right? We
Right.
could take off that little bit.
right,
Or we go to, 8.21
Right.
or 2.
Jennifer?
There's another attachment. Or is that related to this, the draft letter, or is that a separate thing? Separate, okay.
Well,
I have a question about that.
I would
but
say it depends. Excuse me.
Yes. Irv, did you have your hand up? No. Okay. Tell me.
So there are still cuts in this budget over level services. Can you walk me through again what is now being cut?
That's the right spot. Thank you. So I have them on screen here. So this at the top hasn't changed, and so we have the adjustments at the top are mostly things where we're shifting costs. So for example, the reallocation of Summit Academy staff to the tuition revolving, we're shifting the cost from the appropriated budget, which is what we're talking about, versus using a revolving fund to pay for it. So we're shifting costs out of the appropriated budget. IDEA grant is grant funds, similar idea, we're shifting cost out of our budget. Health insurance, we had a projection when we put the budget together of 12%, it went down to just under 10%, so that's the adjustment to health insurance relative to that. So this is a cost avoidance, essentially. Same thing with utilities, we revisited that number and reduced what our need was there, so we again adjusted that budget downward. Support for food service, similarly, is an adjustment down. Shift to custodial salary to revolving fund, the same idea as the top line, and similarly for the last line. Those are all shifts in either funding source or a newer or revised projection of expense needed to cover the costs in that area of the budget. So those are all, those are things that happen or could happen. Some of them are choices, and some of them are just actual costs that aren't there now because we've got refined estimates for things. So that's all stuff that essentially can happen without any adjustment to sort of personnel or otherwise. In this section of reductions, these are so central office administration, it's approximately 2.12 FTE and a total of salaries of $210,000. That's, some open positions. The actual positions that will be eliminated or changed or modified will vary, and we're still working through the process of exactly who and what those are. The second line is an expense line in the superintendent's office. Looking to reduce that just a little bit. This is an area that is for support for services when we have, say, a new superintendent and we want a mentor for them, or a principal that needs a mentor, that sort of thing. But we're going to work with less in that. Committee action COLA, we had made a projection of a cost of living increase for all our committee action staff. Some of whom are principals and directors, but some of them are other staff, like our IS staff and some of our business office and HR staff. So it's a modified version of that cost of living increase. Professional development, again, it's just a cut to the amount of funding we were putting into professional development. We think we can get by with less. It's not ideal. It limits our flexibility with regard to that. Custodial staff, we had hired additional staff during the pandemic. This is a reduction back to a more standard level of staffing for custodial service. The admin leave, we have one of our high school staff that's on a 0.1 leave, so they're 0.9, and that's continuing in fiscal '25, and we had budgeted for the return to a full time, so that's that one. We'll skip down to where we were taking money out again. Program restructuring in summer school. The delivery of summer school is going to be, at the high school level, is different because of the block schedule. They can recoup, one of the things students are often doing in summer school is credit recovery. Because of the schedule, and the ability to have more elective choices. Some of those elective choices are credit recovery for some kids, and so the need for summer school is different. So we're shifting how we're going to deliver summer school. And similarly, the next two lines are, well, for middle school, that same summer school restructuring, similar idea there, and the program restructuring on summer curriculum work, it's less summer work for curriculum and preparation of staff for the summer. That line is about, 15,000 takes about a little less than half out of that budget line. So we're going to do less of that kind of curriculum and preparatory work. The middle school clerical position is one that was added this year to provide some support because there's been some transition in some of the staffing during the year in the middle school. So this support around guidance and discipline has been helpful in kind of keeping things moving and operating smoothly there. And then staff turnover for that small number of staff, 5 and a quarter, basically that's additional savings in things like insurance and that sort of stuff. So that's the nature of those reductions, which then totals the 747,896.
So in terms of people who are directly affected, or positions that are directly affected, it's 3.12, let's say, administrative positions and 2 custodial positions, and no teaching position is
Correct.
affected. Okay, I just want to make sure that it's clear to the public that this proposed budget cuts entirely based on administrators and custodial, and not on teaching.
Right.
And if we get to a similar conversation in the future, let's remember that it was administrators and custodial this year.
Bridget? you had
Well,
your-
yeah, I think the first thing I wanted to say is just, I appreciate it. That's a lot of work to turn around in, I don't know, less than 2 days, 30-something hours. So thank you, Doug, for, all the work on it. So the total amount of cuts coming out is that number down in the corner, the 747. I think when we talk to our towns, we do need to be clear that we've got a tremendous amount of efficiencies out of this budget, that there's been, a significant amount of reductions that we have taken in it. And one thing I think that we can also go back and say is really that we're keeping up with inflation in part, and one of the big reasons why the budgets are falling so hard on towns, all towns across Massachusetts right now, is because the state hasn't also kept up with inflation. So after we pass this budget, we still have a lot of budget work to do, and starting with our state reps and whatnot. So, those are just my big picture thoughts. I don't have any, thank God, I know you're happy, I don't have any more by the line thoughts, Doug. So thank you for your patience with me in this process as I went through every little line.
Jennifer, and then, it's Jennifer and then Sarah.
Okay, so Doug, this is what we asked you to do, so thank you so much for doing it. So basically, we're going to go to each of the towns. Like, for example, we're going to go to Amherst and say, hey, Amherst, you told us you would give us 18.4 million, which is 4% more than last year, but actually we're asking you for 19.2 million, which is 8.2% more than last year. Okay, I get that. So my question's about, and we're going to do that for each of the towns. Like, you told us you'd give us this much, but we're asking for this much, which is great. Like, I feel like that's what we should be doing, but I realize it's not conventional from what we've been doing. So here are my questions. Do the towns have the ability, so if we ask them for this larger amount, do the towns have the ability to approve a lesser amount than what we've asked for?
No. And the reason why is that what that would require is failing the assessment method, and it wouldn't bring us into balance. In other words, they have to appropriate the assessment to match the budget, and so to pass the budget, you got to appropriate enough money for it. And because this would also impact, if they voted a lesser amount, that would be different than what the assessment method is. So then they're not agreeing to the assessment method.
Okay. So I have a couple more questions. Do the towns have the ability to say, okay, we agree to this, Amherst might say, we agree to this 19.2 million, we're going to fund most of it with appropriations, and we're going to fund part of it with free cash or reserves or however they do it?
Yeah, how they fund it's entirely up to the communities.
Okay, and if they did that, do they then have the ability, and that, I guess that answers my question of like, they could then say, this portion we're funding from operating is gonna be the base for which next year's increase?
No, at
Or
that
no,
point,
that would, that, no.
No, what this does, the 19 for Amherst, million, whatever, and for the, $1.6 million for a couple of communities, that becomes the basis for the next
base.
year, because that is the assessed amount. So if we use, and that number in some ways doesn't matter, because what you're really looking at is how much are we budgeting for, what are our sources of funds, the remainder is what gets assessed. And so it impacts things like guardrails, but it doesn't really impact the calculation of what somebody owes. So if for some reason our budget suddenly went from $36 million to $20 million, everybody's assessment would go way down.
Yeah.
And it's not because it's not based on this year's number, but what drives it is the total amount that's been assessed and the total budget.
Okay, thank you.
Sarah?
So this issue of whether, whether the increased funding that's being requested compared to the 1. I wish we could just like label these A and B or something. A with the $1.6 million in cuts, and B with
I mean, we can, right? We have a Tuesday budget and a Thursday budget.
Tuesday.
Let's come Tuesday and
Okay,
Thursday.
no, but now, okay, we also have the Tuesday budget tonight, but we have a new Thursday budget, fine. So whether the additional revenue that's being introduced in this Thursday budget, if it's in the budget, then that's in the assessment and it happens every year. So it's not a one-time ask. Would be asking towns to agree to do that every year. So back to Jennifer's question about that other document, that was a draft memo that I wrote to do what we talked about, it seems like a month ago, I think it was last Tuesday, or anyway, last week, about asking towns for one-time gifts, all right? So we have two options. We have this Thursday budget, which has an increase if they go for it every year, or we have the Tuesday budget with the one-time ask of, well, this here it was $1 million, so that's a little different from what's built into the Thursday budget. But it could be applied in all the same ways, to eliminate all the teaching cuts. But then it is only one time. So we have two ways of getting to the same thing for next fiscal year.
Tillman?
So I think it's a really important question if you're asking for base funding, which is permanent, or one-time funding. And when we discussed the one-time funding, I was for that because it seemed like an easy solution, but the problem will be next year. And we're not expecting that inflation goes down significantly. And if we do one-time funding, then basically we'll have a, 12% increase next year, effectively, because the base is well, maybe not 12, maybe
Can
8%.
I answer?
Yeah,
Suppose-
so all I want to say is, I was for it, but I feel very strongly now that we should start with a request for base, because this is a systemic problem of underfunding the school. It's not a one-time spike that we can expect will go away, and I think we're gonna kick the can down the road if we don't do it base.
I don't know, if you go to the bottom of the memo, it also, or this draft, also mentions Part B of what was proposed last week, which was to say we're going to bend our efforts towards a more long-term solution. So it's up to us to figure what that is and do it. I mean, I'll speak later about which way. Oh, or I'll just say it right now. I will vote for the Tuesday budget plus this, but not the Thursday budget, because I don't think there's even a 5% chance that the 4 towns would agree to the assessment method, and I don't think three of them would agree to the assessments, to the bottom line. It's not from a position of fear or helplessness. I've been watching Amherst Town Council for 5 years, and how they address big financial decisions, and I just don't think it's gonna happen.
William?
So, Doug, so staff are feeling like their jobs might be in flux, or, they have to make their plans. When does the district have to tell them that they're being offered a contract or not offered a contract? I heard that was sometime in April, is that true?
It is. So by contract, if you're not going to be renewed by virtue of a budget cut like this, we have to notify them in writing by April 15th.
Okay.
And what's likely to be a safeguard for us as a district, operationally, is even if you pass the larger budget, because this larger budget amount, which would restore all those positions, we wouldn't have to issue those notices, but because we don't know how it'll play out with the 4 towns, and so the last time we spoke to the 4 towns, it was more like Tuesday's budget versus today's budget. So I think there's a greater risk, and so we would issue those notices to people to make them aware, and then confirm or rescind that once budgets got voted in the town meetings and at Amherst Town Council.
I have a couple of follow-ups, sorry. So if we pass Thursday's budget, today's budget,
Yeah,
and it gets rejected,
yeah.
and who knows if we have enough time to then do another plan. We were talking about that 1.6 cut. Now we're looking at like 2.6 million short if we do the 1/12 budget. So would you have to notify 2.6 million people that they're going to have cuts by April 15th, if that could be a possibility? Or would you be notifying the 1.6? Does that kind of make sense what I'm saying?
I do understand what you're saying.
Okay.
So here's the thing. I don't think we'd be, because that would be a result that plays out in some ways, the implementation of a budget through the state, because we don't technically have one,
Right.
would be considered as if a change happened during the fiscal year. So if a massive change occurs during the fiscal year, something comes up and a revenue source doesn't happen, and we have to make a judgment, an adjustment to a budget and lay people off during a fiscal year, we have responsibility about how to do that, but we can do it. And in our contract, we have a 30-day notice, but state law doesn't require that. But you can make those kinds of adjustments after the fact, and it's separate from that part of it. So I think this would fall more into that kind of category. I will, if you don't mind, I'll talk through that process. So if the budget fails, and there's a number, it could be assessment method, it could be the actual, numbers part of it itself. If the budget fails, a clock starts, and you have a 30-day window. You can ask for an additional 15 days to vote a new budget. So you guys come up with another plan of budget. Once that happens, then it's 7 days to notify the towns, here's the new budget. They then need to call town meeting for 3 of the communities in order to then take up that issue. And so whatever timelines are associated with things like calling town meeting, usually it's at least 10 days, if not a little longer. Let's say they do that and they all vote and it gets resolved before June 30th, then we go with whatever that budget is, right? If we aren't resolved by July 1, then the state comes in and says, all right, you're going to do a 1/12 budget. Typically what they'll do is they'll take your current year, fiscal '24, as the basis for doing 1/12. And they'll say, you've got 1/12 of the budget, assess your towns based on that, and the statutory method, which shifts things considerably. Pelham takes a much bigger hit in that scenario. We sort of saw what that number looks like. However, the commissioner determines that number. So the commissioner, you can make a case like, hey, we've got a bunch of expenses in the first month that we got to pay. Can we have more than that? They could pick 40 million, they could pick a number out of their hat, really. But what they'll probably do is say, okay, here's your current year number of 33 million, whatever it is, and we'll add 3 more million to that for that assessment in the 1/12 budget. And you basically have that conversation each month with DESI as they as you work through the mechanics of coming to a budget agreement that you guys vote for as a school committee, and then the 4 towns can adopt and agree to. And so that process just iterates until you resolve to a budget, and then we resquare the whole thing, you know, based on what you paid to date, what's the rest of the assessment, we sort of resquare the numbers at that point. If you get to December and you haven't resolved, the state takes your finances over from that point on.
And then, regardless of what, I mean, if we pass Tuesday's budget, then it's pretty definite that those cuts are happening and that staff's gonna be released. If we pass the Thursday budget, you're still going to notify them that they could be released, which would probably trigger most of them, I would assume, to look for jobs, because there's not stability.
Right.
And so then if we get the bigger budget passed, we may or may not still have those staff employed.
Correct. And we notify them so that there's no, you know, we would go ahead and notify them, you know, under an abundance of caution.
Right.
And even if we didn't notify them as employees following this and at risk for that, they would recognize that there's the potential, more so in a normal year. So they're seeking other employment. Their opportunities are greater if they start looking in April than if they look in May or June.
Right. And then I guess one more question. This was kind of piggybacking on what Anna said. Like, if you can't have the actual language program, why have it at all if it's like cut down to every third day, every other day? Could we look at, like, in that world language, like, what are the numbers of the enrollment in those 4 languages in middle school? And could we cut 2 languages and keep the other 2 just as robust as they are? Or would that not equal a similar cut in staff and savings?
I think that gets a lot trickier to figure out right on the fly, but.
I was just
mean, sort of-
curious.
Yeah, some of it depends on enrollment, and that changes every year.
Right.
To some extent, it also becomes a bit of a scheduling issue, so it's not just because 4 different teachers teach in 4
Right.
different sections versus 2 teachers in different sections. It sort of has a cascading effect in the scheduling process, so it's a little harder to tease out.
Okay.
And I don't know the schedule well enough to do that in my head right now.
Jennifer?
Okay, I feel like I'm thinking in circles about the thing about if we asked for if we approve the Thursday budget, what I thought I heard Sarah say was, we're asking the towns to give more this year and forever forward. But what I heard Doug say was, not necessarily, because next year, say, state funding goes way up, and then the town share goes down, we wouldn't still, let's say we didn't need, let's say Amherst didn't need 19.2 million, let's say we only needed 15 million from Amherst, we would ask them for the 15 million, not a % increase on the 19 million. So I feel like it's a little confusing because we talk a lot about % increases, like Amherst is gonna give us 4%, as opposed to Amherst is gonna give us this dollar amount. So it almost feels like we start with the percentage and then back into the total amount dollars, but really it's the dollars, and then that happens to work out to a % increase. So we're not necessarily asking them for this additional funds this year and then forever forward, right?
Well, technically, yes. However, the sort of, I've not seen our budget not go up. In other words,
Right.
it would be a pretty extraordinary event, I think, to be in that circumstance. So there's sort of technicality of the mechanics of it, and then the actual sort of what really sort of happens year to year. And the other thing is that, you know, not to make light of the circumstance, but, you know, expenses rise to meet new income. So in other words, if we were in a circumstance where state aid, let's say for some reason, Chapter 70 doubled, so we had this tremendous resource, well, there's a ton of things that we've thought about, wanted to do, could do, that would probably be, so in that section in the middle that's blank right now that says ads, that would get very rich with interesting ideas of things to do.
Right.
Because again, people are gonna presume, oh, the towns can afford to pay us at least what they did last year, so they're gonna hold it at 0, is gonna be the sort of natural default.
Yeah, I get that. Just as a follow-up.
Yep.
I get what you're saying, but also, like, these are, I hate the word, these are unprecedented times, and things don't have to operate the way they always have. And if, like, I'm an optimist, so, like, what if we were able to negotiate with Amherst College? What if they did kick in $1 million a year that would have a significant impact on the town's assessment values. And what if we did pass a proposition 2.5? Well, then the towns would have more. Just like I don't want the default to be we're asking the towns for more next year and forever forward. That's not necessarily the case, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Deb?
I have two thoughts. I'm not really sure which order to present them in. But I'll just go with the first one that comes to the bigger one, which is Bridget's point from Tuesday was that our job is to fund the schools the way we think, with the way we believe meets our responsibilities as a community. The argument could be made, and I'm not going to make it, that we're going above and beyond. I'm going to just take the argument that we're doing the best we can, and reducing anything is going to be less than fulfilling our 100% responsibilities. I think that's a stronger place to go to the town and say, we believe this is true. Help us out this year. We will do everything that we can next year, but we need to engage in a conversation that addresses the fact that level services, if that's optimal and minimal, is going to be for the foreseeable future more than 2.5%, more than 4%. How can we work together to meet these very serious responsibilities? That seems to me a different way of approaching the same goal than to say, here it is in March, everybody's on the hook because of these obligations that we take extremely seriously as the school committee, as do our educators, as does our town. Everybody's on the hook for an increase that's a lot more than they expected. It just seems to me like we could say, we need this now, and we will need it next year, but we don't need you to commit to what we're talking about for next year now, even though we will be over the course of the year. So that's the one thought. And I guess the other thought is with Sarah. I mean, I'm going with what's most likely to happen. And I want to have the most likely budget that doesn't require another meeting a month down the line where we're like, okay, we got this, but not that. We didn't get this, or yay, we got everything. I just feel like this process, as I think William is getting to, has been protracted. At the same time, the conversations with our towns about increases has not been protracted. And I just like to say those two things.
Tommy?
There's nothing concrete that we have that gives us any indication that we can get the necessary funds again next year to not have to trim academic programs and services beyond what we're comfortable with. It was shocking to hear what we would do to the school if we go with the Tuesday budget. I think, as Bridget said, it's not responsible, I'm paraphrasing, but it wouldn't be responsible for us to pass that budget. And there are options out there that might be interesting, right? We've talked about Amherst College again. I think this should go to the town, not to the school committee, but that's water under the bridge. I think we need to start with something that ensures that the services that the school provides are protected by not doing it a one-time, not making it a one-time commitment.
Irv?
Yes, both Tuesdays and Thursdays budget are beyond what the town manager, town council, the BCG, put forward to us. It was 4%. This Tuesday and Thursday budgets go beyond that. And if we say, well, we're just gonna pass either a Tuesday or Thursday budget, and that's going to go then to the towns, and then what we're saying is, we are then hoping, and I'll say the word again, hoping that the town will pass that budget as we give it to them. We're hoping that, and for me, hope is just not a plan. I believe that what will occur, and I'm almost 100% of this, 100% confident of this, that the town, at least Amherst, will reject it and send it back to us. Now, and I also believe that some of the other towns will follow suit. So it is going to then bring it back to us again. And then we start the clock ticking, because Amherst town manager has to have his budget into the town. I forgot that date, in April, but he has to have it there. If it isn't there and we haven't gotten a budget, and the other towns haven't voted on the budget, then we are in danger hitting the July 1st, which really in my case is Armageddon, because it is a draconian budget that we will then face. So I will totally be against doing this particular, the Tuesday or Thursday budget based on that.
Point of clarification, Irv.
In the
Point of
meantime,
clarification, Irv, hold on one second. The Tuesday budget falls within the guidance from our towns, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so,
wait, what is the Tuesday budget, as I understood it, was not in line with the town?
the Tuesday budget is in line with what the town guidance, the guidance from each of the four towns was.
It follows the 4%.
Yes, which was within the guidance from the four towns.
All
The
right, I thought
Thursday
we-
budget
all right.
is outside of that.
All right, so all right, good enough. Then again, well, Thursday then, that budget, this budget that we just presented, the Thursday budget, is a budget is DOA, dead on arrival, at the town, at Amherst and the other towns.
All right, Anna?
So I kind of, I know this, we kind of already talked about this a little bit, but so the problem with asking the four towns for a gift is that we then have to pass Tuesday's budget in the hopes that the four towns allocate an additional amount of money. But the way that money would have been allocated is very different from the way that money would have been allocated if we just enclose it into the budget. And yeah, so the way that we had been talking about what each town would have been required to gift was going to be allocated in the same manner as the regular budget was allocated, which would then mean that it's like 81.31, 4.6, 7.05, and 7.04% of the budget is covered by each. And so the percentages shift quite a bit when we're putting it into the budget. And that obviously hurts Shutesbury the most. It hurts Leverett a bit, and it benefits Pelham and Amherst. And that's exactly how the towns are gonna react when they see that. You know, two towns are gonna be happy and two towns are gonna be mad. And I've been trying to talk to my finance committee. I've been trying to see if they're even open to giving us any more money. And the pushback is, if it's a gift, then like, how are we gonna, compensate for this in the future? Like, isn't this just gonna kick the can down the road, and how are we gonna do that? And so the budget solution is a little bit better in that respect, but it then commits the towns a little bit to what is likely more money going forward. because the base will increase. And so I'm just wondering if there's somewhere in between that we can land that doesn't, but then we have to completely redo the allocation process, and then that has to go back to the 4 towns, and then they have to approve a new allocation method because it wouldn't fit in with the allocation strategy.
I think, can I try?
Was that a question at the
Yeah.
end there?
It's just not possible.
Yeah,
to-
well, what would happen is we'd have to have, so here, I've just put this on screen, so partly because it's not exactly $1 million, it's less than $1 million, but these are the percentages based on the 8.2. So Shutesbury goes from 7.05% of the budget to 7.13% of the budget, of the assessed amount, I should say, of the assessed amount. Leverett goes down 1/100%, Pelham stays the same, and then Amherst goes down the difference in there. So it goes down 1/10, basically, of a percentage point, because they're 81.31, so just about a 10%. So that's the shift there, and so the shift to Shutesbury is the largest, but again, I think that when we go back to the sort of independent guardrails, because that was a way to limit sort of maximum impact, if we go back to sort of base principle of how to assign those costs, this has fidelity to that, which is based on ability to pay, and, because the minimum local contribution has a calculation that's involved with property values and income in the town, and it's a whole thing and so that's, it sort of plays to an argument that has been made over the years in coming to this assessment method. So that's part of why I took this approach, as opposed to taking, because if we were to take the other percentages and then just apply it to I think it's not, if I did the math right, $941,975, then, then it would hold those steady, but the difference is, it's not trivial, it's the increases are large, and the difference between what's in this group of increases versus the other is it's like $5,000 or something like that, which is, for a budget, that's, the size of Shutesbury and Leverett and those, $5,000 is a lot of money. I appreciate that.
It's 18, not 5, for Shutesbury. And so an additional 70,000 for the gift, compared to 88,000 added to the budget, is a pretty substantial difference for Shutesbury. And it's just the likelihood of 88 additional $1,000 versus 70 additional $1,000. I think it's, either one is going to be difficult. I'm not sure it's going to pass.
I would suggest, my argument would be the following, it's just that, again, so ignoring guardrails, going to assessment method, this is holding fidelity to the assessment method and that agreement about how to apportion costs. The guardrails were a boundary we were putting on. The fact that we're going above those, it's like, well, then what we're doing is trying to find some level of guardrail to apply that still meets the dollar amount. So but I think that you want to go back to sort of the basis of the idea of how to apportion the costs, and that's the assessment method, independent of guardrails, and that's why I use this that's my argument for it. I mean, I get your point, though.
Bridget, and then Sarah.
Okay, thanks. So I just think that it's risky and really, sadly, unfortunately, like, just not in line with the reality, at least if you think about state budgets. If we pass the Tuesday budget, I just read in an article Sarah sent me that next year's inflation numbers in the Chapter 70, they're looking at 1.9%. So we know that's nowhere in line with reality of the real costs, right? And not using the base is going to be even compounded when we take out the $500,000 of ESSER that isn't there. So I just think that it just doesn't line up with what the actual facts are to pass the Tuesday budget. Because, again, and I want to say, like, everybody's quoting me, but I want to give, as a proper employee of an academic institution, I want to give notice it was the MACS budget person who I'm quoting. So, and they said it's our job to do what we've promised the community in our goals, in our mission. And I do think to do this, we'll have to go back and rewrite some of our mission statement, because those, if we want to say, oh, we are committed to core academics in a standard of excellence there, maybe we could if we don't count foreign language among that. But like some of the things we promised, we will just fail on in what's in the budget. So those are the things that I'm thinking about to start with. I wanted to just talk to a couple points that other people made. The first one is, there's gonna be work after the fact, but I would argue that budgeting should be a year-round bunch of work, and that prior school committees have seeded some of that, not the good members standing here, but I think in the past I saw that. Secondly, I think asking for a gift is a true act of hope, but asking for what the budget is required to do the job after realizing significant efficiencies is actually our responsibility. Otherwise, why do we sit here? We don't sit here to just pass the budget that the town says we can. Finances are the responsibility of the school committee. Budgets are our responsibility. So I think I would argue more like, hope is, it's not what we're doing. What we're doing is taking up the responsibility that we have and that we need to. I recognize, like, this is far from ideal from everyone, right? But I can't see doing it. We cede all our power by asking for a gift. Right now, at least, we have some power, and the people who are in this room then go to their communities and speak to the town council, who then have the power to decide yay or nay. I know a lot of people have just said that Amherst will be unlikely to do it, but I think that Amherst is going to be in a hard position to say no after what we've just passed on the library and other things. 1 year of payment on the library covers this, on our capital funds. So I think that we're not going to see them that ready when they face the community and hear what it means. Because right now they don't really have the boots on the ground reality. They haven't heard from the teachers and whatnot about what it means. I believe our community can do the work to get there. And at least I hope to, because we got elected to try and do something,
Sarah? So just so we all know, I have Sarah, Deb, Jennifer, Tillman, William, Irv.
Oh, goodness, pretty much everybody. Okay, so now I have three things. I'll work backwards. As to the difference in the extra, in the gift, the draft memo versus Thursday budget, those were done at different times. There's I got those numbers from Doug that I put in this gift memo last week, like before this Thursday budget was done. And that was with $1 million target, and this is not $1 million. There's no reason that they can't agree, that it can't be the same increase to each town in the memo for a 1 year versus this increment Thursday over Tuesday, okay? That's easy enough to do. Second of all, I think we have more than one obligation as school committee members, not just to, as Bridget said, vote a budget, or not only, or it's not limited to voting a budget that meets our mission, but we have to make sure that when school opens in August, it's going to be smooth and effective. And I'm concerned about what could happen if we do get to July with no budget and we're put on this 1/12 business. We don't know which teachers will be around, which means we don't know what classes will be around, which means we don't know what any student's schedule is going to be. So I think we need to have, even if the Thursday budget, that's, we can all get behind that, we need to know that we can have an acceptable plan B in time. And then my last point is that we're trying to hire a superintendent. And I don't want us to hand him or her a gigantic budget mess on the first day. There are enough things that person's gonna have to deal with.
A question and an observation. So the question, one of the things that we haven't discussed is the capital budget. So going forward, it's gonna get large. So right now, the total capital payment for the district is about $500,000 divided amongst the towns. And that just gets really, really big. So one of the things, should we go ahead and talk to our towns about what our expectations are, we should be able to know those numbers. Is all of that money committed? In the projection through 2033, the $2.5 million that we're is that based on what part of the capital plan that has been approved and what is expected to be approved? Is the middle school roof in that? Is there?
So, so just coming back to this for a second, I'll scroll down to capital for a moment. So, all right. So this number is for debt already incurred. Like, it's an actual, like, real thing. And I mean, there's an estimate for interest charge, but that's the only sort of variability there. But it's debt we have, like, on the books. Some of what is in these out years are, continued payments for that debt that we have already, and some of it is projected. So some of it's based on what's shown here. So if these debts, if these get approved and then authorized and we do the projects and then borrow the money, that's factored into these out years, as well as all of the other prospective things we've projected we need to do in our capital plan. So it is presumptive. These aren't actually owed monies. I mean, there's a little bit of it that's truly owed in these out years, because there's actually borrowing on hand that's going to take a few years to pay off, right? But it does carry, the $3 million authorization for the roof at the middle school, which is probably.
It does.
It does carry that. It carries the $1.5 million for the track. It does carry, but it carries, in our broader capital plan, which I think we stuck on the February. There's a sort of booklet of all the
Yeah.
projects, and it has the dollars. All the stuff that's in there is
in
up
that.
here.
Okay, thank you.
Right, and so we have things like high school roof, $5 million,
Yeah.
and windows and doors, and,
Yeah.
and some of that's, very far out in the future and very broadly estimated. And we don't know how, like, state programs like MSBA are gonna change over the next few years. Some things, the systems in this building and the other building are like heating and cooling systems, that sort of thing, are significantly changing, are aging. And when we replace them, we will replace them with systems that are more efficient, greener, et cetera. So, those are probably rougher estimates than would be the case if, like, we're gonna replace with what we had, we could be more precise to some extent, because it's just more well-known technology and estimates and that sort of stuff. But you know what inflation's gonna do and that sort of thing, but anyway.
The other part of that, sorry, so I'm also just going back to what I'm learning as we're talking, and certainly as we're in these trainings. One of the documents that I've gone back to over the last week is something from the Massachusetts Associations for School Committees that has sort of an outline of what they call promising practices. I'm not really sure what it means to be promising versus optimal, but a lot just around the budget. Comprehensive and transparent budget process is number one. Adequate budget is number two, but that's based on a number that the state comes up with. And we're required between the state and the district to meet 82% of that, but not above. And I'm assuming that we are, do we know what percentage we are of that net school spending requirement.
We're way above
82%, are we at 100%
of net school spending?
of net school spending? Yes.
Yeah, so net school spending, we're well above net school spending.
Okay,
The
so,
number of districts that don't meet net school spending, which of course is a very small percentage.
Okay.
Most schools are at their net school spending level or higher.
okay,
The ones that aren't are probably very similar to the ones that are getting the larger parts of Chapter 70
Right.
Student Opportunity Act.
okay, that makes sense. So, unfortunately, for everyone. 3 is financial tracking, forecasting, controls, and audits. 4 is cost-effective resource management, and this is the part of the homework that we haven't done. I get that we come in and we say, we look around and we listen to our educators and we listen to our administrators and we say, we can't go less. But I can't see going to the town, well, I can see going to, I will go to the town and say whatever we need to say. But I expect the town to say, you haven't done your homework yet, because this one has us as a district having plans and analyses of the programs we have in place. The district implements a review process to determine the cost effectiveness of its programs, initiatives, and activities. I don't think we've done that. If we have, I'm not aware of that. So do I expect our programs, initiatives, and activities to be aligned with our goals? I hope so, but I can't go to the town and say X amount of dollars is going to get us there, because as far as I know, I don't have that information to back up that statement besides my personal belief and my belief based on what I've heard in public comment.
Jennifer?
Okay, let's see. At this point, I'm not worried about getting to June 30th without a budget. That's the least of my worries right now. If after the 4th town votes, if none of them voted, or if not enough of them voted to approve it, then we need to kick into high gear. We will need to meet again. Yes, we'll need to meet again. That's okay. And we'll need to make cuts. And maybe we'll need to make all the cuts. Maybe we'll need to make all the cuts that we're trying to restore. Maybe we'll be in the same position now then. But we have to try. We can't not try. We have to try. And it might be messy, and that's okay. We can do it. We have to try. And regarding this, having a new superintendent, I mean, I want to show the superintendent that the school committee is willing to fight for the schools and that the community is willing to fight for the schools. And I'd rather hand them a messy situation than hand them a budget, hand them the Tuesday budget. So my suggestion, maybe after you've gone through the list, or people have had more chance to talk, is that we do a straw poll at this point in like Tuesday or Thursday and just see where people are and see how we want to move forward.
Sure. Tillman?
So, following up what the person at MASC said, we have done our responsibility. We have cut $748,000 out of the budget compared to the level service budget to make it less costly. If we pass Tuesday's budget, we know what will happen, which is terrible things will happen to our schools. We might not know what happens if we pass Thursday's budget, right? And I think that's what we need to do. But I think it's, I forget who said that, but somebody said that we have to, I think Bridget, you were that we have to make it clear to the towns that this is really all we can do to maintain and maintain some level of quality in the town, in the schools. And if the town decides that they cannot do it, I don't want to embarrass them or anything, but if they say this is not the priority that we want to follow, then we'll go back and we'll make it work. It's really complicated for the towns to call an extra town meeting. It's not. So, but I mean, if we don't do that, then we've cut the languages. I mean, this will be a totally different place. But what Deb said about the capital budget, is there any way, because the capital budget is on top of what we're asking the towns to do. So if we can reduce the capital budget, the total impact for the towns will be, at least for this year, somewhat less, right?
That's interesting.
Right, but the capital budget is based on money that's borrowed.
Right.
Currently borrowed.
Understood. So we certainly pay our debt, no question. But the FY25 capital plan in the document on page 10 lists a number of projects that we would add.
Right. That
So-
helps fiscal '26.
Sorry, explain that.
So we authorize the borrowing, we do the borrowing next year, the bill comes due the following year.
I see.
Not the total bill, but the
First.
first bill of the debt borrow. So it would impact, it would be, so if, let's say we didn't do any debt authorization, I'm not suggesting that, I'm just saying that's a simple way to think of it. It's like, we made that zero, then that column that's under fiscal '26, that's at currently at $530-something thousand, goes down to 480 or something, right? Because it's, 1/5 of most of the projects that would be due in that first year. So it has an impact, and that's a consideration. I mean, that's definitely a consideration.
Yes.
Maybe as a sign of good faith of we're trying everything we can we look at the projects that we have in the FY25 capital plan and see which ones we can delay? The effect will basically be that we will have less good facilities, but that's still better than not having a language program or all the things we heard on Tuesday. And so specifically, I'm asking if we can delay to the next year, the parking lot paving and sidewalk replacement, theater lighting, and gym bleachers. Those are things that are less bad than taking languages out of the program. And so that's $350K, which is about 2/3 of the capital budget, and it's just a sign of good faith.
I think that's entirely up to the committee. I think that
Sure.
all of these are your choice. And so when you make the motion, if you just don't read those when you're going through it, and then we'll figure out the math.
Anyway,
before you
I'm
get
just
to the final
suggesting
number.
that
But I'm
as
saying
a.
it's absolutely a possibility of a direction to go, and I think then, and something you want to communicate to the towns if that's the direction you head.
William.
So I feel like Bridget, thanks to Bridget, line, she looked at every line, right? I feel like we have Tuesday and Thursday budget, and Tuesday is not something I can stand behind because of the substantial cuts. And then we have Thursday's budget that puts all the teachers and staff back in. Is there a way we could look at something in between those?
A Wednesday budget.
Thursday, what did I say?
A Wednesday budget.
Maybe it was, I don't know. Maybe Doug finished it on those.
No, I'm just saying between Tuesday and
okay.
Thursday is Wednesday.
But I looking at we were gonna cut out high school teachers, prep academy, math, PE, RJ Dean, science, art, and it came to 5.3 staff, and so that was 373,000. Is there a way that we could, not saying do it today, because maybe we're not there, like we can't do that on the fly, because I know we have to pass something, but if we push forward Thursday budget, it doesn't pass, is there a way that we could really look at how effective each of these cuts would, how many students would that one cut, the math teacher, is it a huge thing if we got rid of that component for the high school? Or how many students would that impact? I feel like it's hard for me to sit here and say it's either no teachers cut or it's 15 point whatever it was, the total. And is there some way that we can look at it as here to look at what would be least impactful on the students and long term?
I'll just offer a little bit.
Okay.
So the short answer is yes, we can definitely look at that, and that would be a level of detail I have to go back and talk through with the administrators a little bit, because they know that nuance a little bit better than I do off the top of my head. But I do think, and I think there are some of those reductions that are less impactful than others, certainly. And obviously, if we pass, if you pass the larger amount and it fails, that's certainly in the mix. The other thing that happens when we're at that point of the year, we're basically a month later. There's more things we know a month later than we knew before, right? So there's some of that where it poses a difficulty, and this is true. This is true with even with just passing one tonight that may fail, is how it impacts the sort of scheduling process, because they're starting that process of building staff schedules and how many sections can we have while they're simultaneously sort of tallying up what they've learned from all the students who've made their requests. They're starting a process now, and it's easier to add than to take away. So when they're building, when they're sort of building schedules, that was a quote from Ms. Gromacki today. She's like, it's a little easier to add a section of something in the totality of the schedule than it is to sort of remove them. You have to restructure a lot more stuff when you do that. So that's just to keep in mind as you think about that and how that plays out. But, we'll know a lot more a month from now than we know now, and so that may change the dynamic of the conversation around those reductions. And certainly we can work through, scenarios that are somewhere in between the two. That's certainly the case. I mean, we could potentially sort of play around with some numbers, but I don't, it would be a little difficult because, again, we could do it from so there's 5.33 high school teaching staff and 2.32, if we just want to reduce that number to say 4.33, which is overly simplistic way to approach it and not really getting to the nitty gritty of what it is, we can work out what those numbers are, kind of on the fly a little bit. But I think that the hard part is that the choices of what to really do is harder to know without a little more stuff.
And I was gonna say, do you feel that you have some insight? Because I'm assuming you've been working with staff to get to this 1.6, and y'all kind of did hard looks at what programs could you look at cutting and not cutting and all that. Do you have a sense in your head that of some stuff that we could put back but not put back? Or would you really need the time to go talk to the other staff about that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I don't know it well enough to do it right at the moment.
Okay.
And I have a couple of pieces that I know that I recall. That's the
Right.
other piece. I've heard
No,
a lot
no,
of
I
things,
understand.
and what I recall
Right.
at this point is a little less than that. But I would probably, to really do it in a sincere way, and because again, we're the implications of this are not just the sort of financials, like folks in maybe in the audience, but certainly listening at home, that it's like, wait, that's my job, not that kind of thing. It gets really dicey too. So I want to be confident what we're suggesting when we do that.
What happens if we don't pass something tonight? Say if we wanted to have those fine-tooth things and really get to a number, and we got to it like Monday, is that like a no-go?
My understanding from the town is pretty much, like, they have to be on the warrants, and they have to be warranted so many days in advance of their town meetings.
But we're gonna, if we pass this and it doesn't get passed, then they're gonna have to call another special meeting anyway.
Yeah.
So if
So-
we couldn't do a fine-tooth ask, I don't know, I'm just asking, I'm thinking out loud, sorry. I'll be quiet now.
Okay, so I have on my list currently Irv, Anna, Bridget, Deb, Tillman, and then we've been asked for a straw poll. So, does that feel okay to everyone, or?
Well, I would like my question answered before I vote in a straw poll. I mean,
Okay,
so just put me at the end.
sure.
Yeah.
All right. Irv, you're up.
So the responsible thing to do is for us to pass the Tuesday budget with the addition of any capital, any money from capital added in. Not to do that, and leave our fate in the hands of the town manager and town council is irresponsible for me. And we also know the result we all know that if we go with the Thursday budget, that it is going to be rejected by the towns and our town council and the town manager here. Just remember, the town manager has to have a budget into the town council. And his budget, when it goes in, cannot be increased. It can be decreased, but it cannot be increased by the town council. We need to keep that in mind. So the responsible thing for me is, let's pass this Tuesday budget and then do the following. One, ask for gifts from the towns. And two, go forward with a strategic ask for assistance from Amherst College. We can do those things, but don't put our hands put our foot in the hands of the towns who are certainly going to reject the Thursday budget. I would really, really urge us not to do that. We put ourselves in a position where we know we're going to be back at it trying to, and under more urgent conditions, trying to come up with a budget that we had already rejected. Thank you.
Anna?
So I want to reiterate what Jennifer said. If we put forward Thursday's budget and it fails, we can absolutely come back together very quickly and pass Tuesday's budget without and that the towns have already said they could manage. So the worst case scenario, I think, is we end up with Tuesday's budget a little bit further down the road, but we'll probably have to cause the towns to hold another special town meeting because they'll have to re-vote on the budget. But they'll have to do it, and it'll happen. And so that's always something for them to consider when they reject it. So push it just a little bit harder. And I do think that by leaving it up to chance, by passing the Tuesday budget now, and then hoping that we can raise $1 million before the whenever time frame, I think that puts us in a much worse position. And so I think we should pass the Thursday budget and then continue to go to Amherst College and try to raise some additional money so that when and I don't know, Doug, can we adjust, so we pass a budget and then if we raise $1 million before town meeting, but after the deadline for the warrant posting, how does that work?
So some of it depends on like the moderator and whether or not they feel, so you can make,
You can make an amendment.
when you make a motion, you can amend what was in the
Okay.
text, but it has to be within scope. So they have to, and usually when you shrink a number, like a budget number, that's usually considered within scope. That's at least how the Amherst Town moderator did it years ago. I don't know how Leverett, Shrewsbury, and Pelham think about that. Where it gets a little trickier is, or where it could potentially get a little trickier is around the assessment method, because that would change. And so that language, we have to vet with the state first. And so that's also part of, that would require we'd want to make sure to check to see, is this still okay if we make that adjustment? Because, and again, it would have to be deemed within scope by the moderator. Those would be the key mechanics of it, I think.
Okay.
Bridget?
So I just wanted to say that if Tillman made the motion to reduce that $260,000 from the capital budget, that's a motion I would second. Even though I understand capital and operating are different things, we could at least package it as having cut $1 million already from the respective budgets, and that makes us look like we're really working in the right direction to save the town's money without, I think everyone knows we'd be gutting the programs and our values. The one other thing I wanted to say is I agree with Deb, and I want to look at that list with you, but I've been part of processes like that, and they usually take a year, the list that you did from the MASC. And I also heard Doug say that they were bringing in a consultant or someone on that, so I think having that person report to the school committee when they're done with their work would be like the right move for us to be more in the know and understand where efficiencies. I agree, we spend more than some other towns, and we spend more than some other towns in different areas. Like, you can look at all that on the radar data, and it's really interesting. And I had a lot of fun. Thank you, voters of Amherst, for voting me in, just so I could look at all that. But, when you have a system or institution, and you say, we're gonna cut 11% of this teaching, of the teachers in this institution, there's nothing you can do that's not going to create a situation where you've harmed the culture of the institution, right? So it's a little bit different. We would need a strategic plan of how we were going to get more budget worthy as opposed to doing it in this way, sorry to say. I mean, I like to be careful with money as well, but I don't know how to do it here. I mean, we're saving $1 million if Tillman makes the motion.
I have Deb, then Tillman, then Sarah, and then a suggested straw poll.
So, the more I listen, the more thoughts I have, but I'll keep them really short. I do appreciate William's thoughts about finding a Wednesday budget, but I think it's all or nothing. I think it's Tuesday or Thursday. I just can't see at this point in our deliberations trying to split the difference and figuring out which part of student-facing services we're going to try to preserve today and which part we're not. I think that's something that we're just going to, in my heart, something we're going to have to come back to, having tried the other way. So that's my first thought. And I really like the idea, both Tillman's and Bridget's, of saying we've cut $1 million. I like the idea of saying we're putting our personnel before our roofs, and that roof really needs to be addressed. But in the same vein, I've been saying let's get our line up our ducks and try to find other ways of funding our schools. But I think it makes way more sense to say this is our commitment as a community to fund payroll. And let's find other ways to pay for these capital expenses that we're going to try to borrow against. I don't know if that's naive or not, but I really like that way of framing Thursday's budget. So I would support that also.
Tillman and then Sarah.
Quick clarification, the roof is not affected by the change in the capital project.
Right,
So
thank
just
you.
because that is a really urgent thing, and I want to make sure that people understand that that's not, it's
Yeah,
parking lots, theater lighting, gym bleachers.
right, but the,
And it adds up to 300K, so the
Right.
$1 million statement is still accurate. I'm also not in support of a Wednesday budget. No, and
We have 4 more
because,
days.
because we absolutely have to pass something that needs to go to the towns. Even if it's rejected, we get some sense back of, what the feedback is. And I forget who said it, but somebody said, I don't know which program to pick, right? I think we've made the responsible choice of reducing administrative cost and things that we can trim out. But I would not be ready to pick one program over another and say, oh, sorry, this, And I would expect that the maximum we can find, even if we fine tune for a while, is, an FTE here, maybe half one there. It's not going to add up to something that is substantial, that will make the decision for the town significantly easier. And so I do think we absolutely have to pass the Thursday budget, because if we pass the Tuesday budget and we employ magical thinking about some donations, we will have a disaster on our hand when school starts and the languages are gone. I mean, with the things that we discussed on Tuesday. So I am 100% in favor of passing the Thursday budget. And if the towns decide that they don't want to support that, we'll do all the things there. But it's then clear that, we cannot rely on the support of our communities to provide the level of academics and services that we currently have. And that will be clear to us, and then we can act accordingly. But I don't think it should be us who make that decision, seeing that we already cut $1 million and basically ruin something good that we have.
Sarah.
Thank you. So I'm realizing that something that's important to which way I go on this is how quickly we can get to Plan B how quickly we can get to Tuesday if we end up going with Thursday and it's defeated. So my question is, I mean, the town, I gather Leverett and Shutesbury have their town meetings on April 27th. The soonest Amherst is going to, and it doesn't go into the town budget. The regional budget is separately appropriated. I don't think the town manager has anything to do with it. But it does have to get reviewed by the finance committee, and they have to have a hearing because it's an appropriate, anyway. If we're not, so when do we know that the budget, let's say the Thursday budget has failed? If on April 27th, those two towns don't both vote in favor of the assessment method, and they, and both of them reject the Thursday budget, then there's no way we can, it doesn't even matter what Pelham or Amherst does. So could we meet like the next business day, the next Tuesday, and vote a new budget before Pelham and Amherst have even met, and just start pushing that in the hopper? Or do we have to wait till all four towns have weighed in on whatever budget we send them first? Because that will take a long time and get us closer to July 1st. Okay, so how soon can we put forward a Plan B?
So, presuming that Leverett or Shutesbury's town meeting is a single morning, which it always is, but if either one reject the assessment method, we will not have a budget. So essentially, yes, we could start the process of dividing a new budget Saturday afternoon, quite frankly. But the thing that you have to keep in mind is it's one thing for you guys to vote a budget. It's also, you've got to vote a budget that you think will pass in the four towns. So the political process still has to happen. So while you can take action and begin that before the others vote, that's perfectly fine. That may make it easier on Amherst because they don't have to, do something that they want to not really do, and they can just take up a number that's going to pass the other three towns. But, so you can technically get started right away, and you've got to, while you guys may have unanimity about what's the next step, you're going to have to connect with select boards and finance committees to get some sense from them, which, some of it you'll have from having been at those town meetings on that Saturday. But you'll need that feedback from those sources to say what's a budget that they'll pass. And so that will inform how you choose and go through the process. Because again, it's a cooperative one. And that's when the state, if you get to July 1st, so, they start to be a little more heavy-handed with what you need to do. But even before that, they're encouraging, you as a school committee to actively pursue a new budget in the context of working with those other boards and committees to get it passed in those towns. And so that's, it's part of the rationale behind why we have four towns meetings, right? And we talk about assessment methods and that sort of thing. And I think it was, it's been a while since we've talked about a cut of this size. And so I think the institutional knowledge of folks that were at those four towns meetings has been lost a little bit, because when we've had to make this size cut, 10 plus years ago or whenever it was, we had this kind of cut, the sort of conversations we're having about teaching staff and impacts and that were very parallel to these. But I went on about another thing, sorry, but back to your question. Yeah, basically Saturday afternoon you could start, but you got to do it. You can pass the budget, then you have a notification process that you have to follow, but you want to pass a budget that has some chance of getting passed by the towns. So that's the piece that you have to consider.
Well, I would hope that the Tuesday budget would still be okay. I mean, if it isn't, then we're really in trouble.
May 1st would be the soonest we could meet after that. If it fails on April 27th, right? And then we can post a meeting on the 29th, and then 48 hours later is May 1st.
So what day of the week?
It's a Wednesday.
Thank you.
It's a Wednesday.
We have a Wednesday budget.
There you go.
Okay, so that was our last comment before we decided to have our straw poll. I will just say for myself, when looking between the Tuesday and the Thursday budget, I see they're hard, right? Like in deciding between the two of them. But at the end of the day, for me, the reason I chose to be on school committee was because as a grown-up, I can help give kids who don't have a voice. And I will be happier to look at myself tomorrow morning in the mirror with the Thursday budget than I will with the Tuesday budget. I am willing to have the grown-ups in the town be mad at me than to have kids feel like we don't care. So, I am 100% behind the Thursday budget. Okay. Does anyone have any experience with a straw poll?
Why don't you
You
just go around and
just
say
go around?
Tuesday or
Okay.
Thursday?
Right.
Oh, so not proposing.
Not proposing, just a straw poll. How do you feel Tuesday or Thursday? Irv.
Tuesday.
I, Sarah Beth, feel like a Thursday. Tillman,
Thursday.
Deb,
Thursday with the Tillman
That was
caveat.
bonus items.
Yeah.
Anna,
Thursday.
William,
Thursday with or without Tillman.
Jennifer,
Thursday.
Bridget,
Yeah, Thursday, and I invite Tillman back.
and Sarah.
I'll say Thursday with those capital drop the capital requests, and just go ahead and notice a meeting for May,
Post a meeting
whatever it
for
is.
May 1st.
Post Wednesday, post our Wednesday meeting.
We have a little while before we have to get to that, but
But that gives almost 2 months to work out a solution.
Tillman?
I just want to point out that the worst case is not that it fails on the April 27th. The worst case is that it fails later, right?
Yeah.
So it's not clear that that will be the time where we need the meeting.
Right, it could pass at one or two of, if it passed at one or two of those towns, then
Oh, right,
that would
right,
be
right.
push it out.
Right.
Just, you asked for what the
Right.
soonest would be, that would be the soonest. William?
Could we not just schedule a meeting? Like, what, we have to, we don't need to wait till after we have that. We could schedule a meeting and then cancel it if it worked out well.
Let's do it on Tuesday.
You know, like we
If I-
could schedule it on a Tuesday or whatever and then cancel if need to.
If I could, we have a meeting scheduled for April 30th.
Oh,
And Pelham's town meeting is May 11th, and we have a meeting scheduled for May 14th.
look at us, we are already so organized.
And then I have one more question real quick. So the first two towns at the town meetings did, one part of it gets rejected, so we know we have to come back to the table. When is the date for the next town's meeting, and could we revise our budget to where then they could go in and amend to ask for a lower amount than what would be on the warrant?
The
So
next
th-
town
those
meeting
two-
is in 2025.
No, I mean for the other
Pelham.
two towns.
Like for
For
For like
May
Pelham and
11th,
Amherst
after
that haven't
Leverett
met
and
yet.
Tewksbury.
Could we hurry up and pass a different budget, and then their warrant item would be reduced, and those two towns wouldn't have to call special meetings? I'm just asking.
I think it's a possibility. I think it depends, again, whether the moderator would consider that change to the motion to be considered within scope, which, if it's less, it sometimes is. Amherst, on the other hand, is a lot more flexibility because the council can meet whenever and do whatever. So they have a lot more flexibility. They have traditionally voted the regional budget early, meaning in early May, because of the timing of the other three towns. But, they actually posed a question to me, is there a deadline other than June 30th? And I said, no, June 30th is absolutely so they can be flexible and have that decision later. There is the potential that, say, Shrewsbury wouldn't have to call a special town meeting, but I wouldn't guarantee it necessarily, but.
Sorry,
And then what
why
are the
would-
dates of the four towns meetings? Do you know that off the top of your head?
Here.
Leverett and Shrewsbury are April 27th, and Pelham is
May 11th.
the 11th. And then Amherst is
Whenever
flexible.
I have a question about the vote. So we vote a budget and we vote an assessment method, or the town, we recommend both? And they're separate, right? That 4 towns have to pass the assessment method, but 3 have to pass the budget. And those are separate motions, or they're just all, it's like, how's that work?
They're generally technically separate on the warrants. They wouldn't necessarily have to be, but crafting that motion is a little tougher. So generally, there's distinct actions, much as they are for you tonight. So there's a motion we have on page
Right.
8 that is the assessment method
Right.
first. Then it sets what you do for a budget, which is the second step. And typically, the towns take up the same. They may vote the dollars first and then vote the assessment later. It depends on how they structure their warrant, but they've got to pass them both. And essentially, the assessment method's a really critical piece, but you have to have if you're doing an alternate assessment method, you have to have that, all 4 towns must approve that. you know.
And,
And 3 of the 4 have to do the numbers, but, so,
Why would
you generally want all 4 in both cases, because the assessment method doesn't make sense without the
Right.
the other making, getting passed as well.
and alternate alternate just means different than the state funding level,
Yeah.
not than what was done previously.
No, so the state has 2 terms. They have a statutory method,
Okay,
and everything else, regardless of how you do it, is called an alternative method.
okay.
And so we use an alternative method.
And every year we use an alternative method,
That's
so
right.
every year we vote that. And if it fails every year, then it's the statutory method.
No, the budget fails, and then we have to go through the conversation.
Okay,
Right.
got it. Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up to that?
Mhm.
Not that this would necessarily happen, but if the 4 towns passed the assessment method, but not the budget.
We still don't have a
We're
budget.
just getting spicy.
Right.
Still don't have a
We
budget, all right,
we still don't have a budget. That's correct.
okay.
You'd have an agreement about how to do it if you just had a number, but no money. That's right.
Oh,
Okay.
man.
I have,
Can I ask a quick strategy question?
so I have Jennifer Tillman and then,
I'm prepared to make 2 motions, one at a time. So Doug, I'm gonna move the assessment method first and then the budget, okay. I move to amend Section 4 of the Amherst Pelham Regional School District Agreement by replacing subsection J as follows. For fiscal year 2025 only, the alternative operating budget assessment shall be calculated as a 5-year average of minimum contributions, with the remainder of the assessment allocated to the member towns in accordance with the per pupil method found in Section 4E of the Amherst Pelham Regional School District Agreement. Additionally, if any member town's assessment based on this method increases or decreases more than 8.2% from their fiscal year 2024 assessment, the fiscal year 2025 assessment shall be limited to an 8.2% change, provided that the requirements of minimum local contribution are still met. The 5-year average minimum contributions will include the most recent 5 years or take any other action relative thereto.
Second. Yeah, 6. Yeah,
Tillman?
it's 6E, not 4E.
Oh, sorry, 6E, and, thank you, Section 6 and Section 6E. I can't do Roman numerals.
Thank you. All right, so the assessment method has been moved and seconded. It's now open for discussion. Is there any discussion? No discussion. Okay. And now to our vote. Irv?
No.
Sarah?
Yes.
Bridget?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
William?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
Deb?
Yes.
Tillman?
Yes.
And Sarah Vess, yes. So our assessment method passes 8 to 1 to 0. Okay. Jennifer?
I move to adopt a budget of $35,748,545 for fiscal year 2025 for the Amherst Pelham Regional School District, and to assess member towns according to the method in the just approved amendment as follows. Amherst, $19,229,322. Pelham, $1,087,815. Leverett, $1,667,349. Shutesbury, $1,688,432.
Second.
All right, so it has been moved and seconded, and now it is open for discussion. Irv?
Is this the Tuesday budget we're talking about?
This is
No,
the
it's the Thursday.
budget.
All right, I just want to be clear.
Yep, this is the
So,
Thursday budget.
thank you.
Any more discussion?
Mine is in capital.
Right, okay, never mind. So it has been moved and seconded, no discussion, discussion is over, rather. Irv?
No.
Sarah?
Yes. Excuse me.
Bridget?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
William?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
Deb?
Yes.
Tillman?
Yes.
And, oops, and Sarah Beth, yes. So our budget passes 8-1-0. Our operating budget. All right.
I defer to, Anna, do you want?
I just have one quick question.
Yeah.
We could send a request to Amherst to speed up their process and consider the budget before April 27th, or we could encourage them to slow things down and have it after May 11th and be the last. Is there a strategic interest in pushing it early or pushing it late?
Sarah?
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah, if Amherst acts soon, and let's say just votes down the assessment method, we know we have to come back and bring a new budget. So maybe the sooner that, I mean.
But if-
but, I mean,
if-
you can argue
If they
that
go
we can-
last and
uh,
all three towns approve it, will they feel more pressure
Yeah.
to vote yes? Or is it just likely to fail because nobody knows what's going on? I don't know.
Just ideas. Thank
Just-
you. Tillman?
Why are we planning for failure? We just discussed how terrible it is if this budget does not get paid for by the
I know,
towns.
but we don't,
It makes no sense to put a path forward where, you know, any town can get out of this. I mean, if they do, now, we shouldn't make it, we shouldn't plan for that. I mean,
You don't want to plan for it.
I am worried that the discussion about this failing makes it sound as if that's an okay outcome for the schools, and it is not. Therefore, I want Amherst to go through whatever process they want to go through, and I want Leverett to go through whatever process they have to go through, so that they can find the money to support our schools at this level. And if it doesn't work, we'll figure it out. And I really don't want to talk about the failure of this, because it makes it sound as if this is okay.
well,
Sarah? Did you
Well, I don't.
pull your hand back? It's fine. There is no pressure. I just
No,
thought
I
your
know.
hand went up.
no,
Okay.
Point of order. Can we take a 5-minute break?
Yes. So we'll take a 5-minute break and come back at 8:40. 7-minute break.
Yeah, so this is magnetic, so it sticks like this.
capital.
Really cool.
If they can't, if we.
Covers the previously agreed upon debt so that we can pay for our debts, which is on page 9 of the document. So I move to assess member towns for debt service on previously approved projects according to the debt schedule for FY25 as follows. Amherst, $388,922. Pelham, $29,311. Leverett, $44,700. And Shutesbury, $35,973.
Second.
All right, it has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Oh,
So I
Sarah?
just want to clarify, so the projects you were suggesting that we cut are for next year, or we're not doing that?
Different motion.
May I answer?
Yes.
There will be two motions.
Oh,
The current one is for paying for our debt, so there's no
you mean the debt service?
debt
The
service for
current- okay.
past projects for
Yeah.
which we really have no flexibility.
Okay.
Second.
We already did.
I
thought
think it
there
was
was a
already
second.
seconded
Oh.
by Jennifer. Sorry, though. Was there any more discussion? Okay. Irv, how do you vote?
Yes.
Sarah Marshall?
Yes.
Bridget?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
William?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
Deb?
Yes.
Tillman?
Yes.
And Sarah Beth, yes. Passes 9-0. Tillman?
I would like to make another motion, and that's for the capital projects that are on page 10. And the way I'm going to read it is I'm going to leave in the ones that are proposed minus the parking lot repaving, sidewalk replacement, gym bleachers, and theater lighting. And there's 2 parking lot pavements. So I move that the district hereby appropriates the sum of $177,000 for the purpose of paying costs for the following projects, including the payments of all costs incidental or related thereto. 1, high school boundary fence upgrade replacement, the amount of $20,000. 2, Summit Academy exterior door replacement and security separator replacement in the amount of $32,000. 3, middle school air handlers in the amount of $30,000. 4, middle school south domestic hot water system renovation in the amount of $50,000. 5, middle school fire safety system upgrades in the amount of $30,000. 6, district-wide energy management, HVAC controls and upgrades in the amount of $15,000. Said sum to be expended at the discretion of the Regional School District Committee, School Committee. To meet this appropriation, the district treasurer is authorized to borrow said amount under and pursuant to Chapter 71, Section 16D of the general laws and the district agreement as amended, or pursuant to any other enabling authority. Any premium received upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any such premium applied to the payment of the costs of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of costs approved by this vote in accordance with Chapter 44, Section 20 of the general laws, thereby reducing the amount of authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount.
Second.
Has been moved and seconded. It's open for discussion. Jennifer?
I missed it. Tillman, did you say what the total sum was?
177,000, so that's
Perfect,
300,000 less than proposed originally.
Any further discussion?
Well, I have a
Sure.
question.
Sure.
Maybe we have no choice now, but this is a much smaller sum. Would we still bond it?
Yes.
Any further questions? Okay. Irv, how do you vote?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Bridget?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
William?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
Deb?
Yes.
Tillman?
Yes.
And Sarah Beth, yes. It passes 9-0 to 0. Also Tillman.
I move that within 48 hours from the date on which this vote is adopted, as in now, the secretary be and hereby is instructed to notify the Board of Selectmen or Town Council of each of the member towns of this district in writing as to the amount and general purposes of the debt herein authorized as required by Chapter 71, Section 16D of the general laws and by the district agreement. In addition, the committee shall cause the same information to be published within 10 days after such authorization as a paid notice in a newspaper circulating in the district.
Second.
All right, has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Jennifer?
I just wanted to request if future motions like this say select board instead of Board of Selectmen, since Board of Selectmen is an outdated term that many towns don't use.
It may be required by law, because in state statute, it's still called Board of Selectmen, which is weird, but it is. I don't disagree with you on the intent here at all.
Gotcha.
Any further discussion? All right. Irv, how do you vote?
Yes.
Sarah, how do you vote?
Yes.
Bridget?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
William?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
Deb?
Yes.
Tillman?
Yes.
And Sarah Beth, yes. This passes 9-0 to 0. Whew. William?
I was just gonna say, do we need to, as the chair or someone, make a statement of how we stand behind this budget and the importance we think of for the towns to move this forward? And we don't plan on having to come back to the table? I mean, just,
I mean,
or do the numbers just stand for themselves and it's fine?
I think it's fine if we want to make a budget. I mean, personally, I was expecting to be here much later. So if we wanted to take a few minutes and draft something together, I think that's fine because while it can very well come from the chair, I think if it comes from all of us, it's much stronger.
Yes.
Irv?
While I agree with that sentiment, coming together as a group to make and to construct a letter on a vote that just took place, it would seem to be more efficient, more effective for the chairs to do that. So I'm making a motion to adjourn.
Okay. Is there a second to the motion to adjourn? It looks like we don't have a second. Sorry, Jennifer?
So I think William has a great idea, and but I also agree with Irv that I feel like writing by committee isn't a great idea. But I wanted to suggest, Sarah Beth, that I'll work with you. I think a press release is in order. I think this is kind of an unprecedented thing we just did, and I think we're going to want to get the word out there and try to control the narrative a little bit because the press is going to report whatever they want to report. So I'll help. I'll work with you to draft something, and we can share it with the committees and then send it out.
Okay, thank you. Deb, did you have your hand up?
I did. Again, brand new, month 2. Would it make sense to do a joint statement with the APEA?
I would say this
No.
was our budget that we voted, and
Okay.
it is us making a statement.
Okay, thank you.
Irv's gonna say.
Irv?
Yeah, again, trying to do a letter of this by, committee is just not good. So I would like to go along with Jennifer said, take that suggestion and move on, unless we have to vote on a motion in terms of Jennifer's suggestion.
I don't think so. Tillman, did you have another?
Yeah, I mean, I think we shouldn't say that we stand behind our budget, because hopefully everything we vote for, we stand behind. I think what we can say is that, unfortunately, this is a larger amount than, we got guidance for, and here are the reasons why this was absolutely necessary. But let's be careful how we phrase it, because we usually stand behind what we vote for.
Okay. Anna?
Just to be clear, you're gonna draft a press release, but all of our names are gonna go on it?
Or the regional school committee,
Yeah, from the entire regional school committee, not just the chair.
not
Yeah.
just Sarah Beth.
Yes. It doesn't have to be our individual names, but just
No, just
make it
from
clear that it's from the whole
The
committee.
regional school committee, and I think in previous, help me if I'm wrong, but I think in previous iterations of something along these lines, it's been written and then sent to the committee, and you can send back your edits just to those people, and then edits can be made and it will be sent out. Does that sound like I feel like we've done that before, right? Ish? Okay. Sarah?
And do we then attach it either to this meeting agenda after the fact? I mean, do we need to,
I mean, if it's a press release, it'll go to the press.
we don't have to,
It'll be
Preserve it in
super
our-
public.
yeah, but for posterity, years.
Irv?
Archival.
But, I just remember that, as school committee members, even though, we may disagree with the results of any given vote, we are required to support the majority. However, it does not mean that there cannot be a minority statement.
I don't know how to answer that.
Wasn't a question.
Okay.
Okay.
That was not a question.
Okay. Bridget?
I don't, I'm just gonna say flat out, that always seemed like a little of an interesting thing, but I did hear it again at the training, like, you still can't hold your personal opinion. You don't wanna speak publicly against the board once a decision has been made. But I would say that I remember on the last school committee that, like, they tried to censure someone for having an independent public opinion. I don't know if I agree with that or not either. I don't think I do, but I do think that putting a minority statement out against something that the majority of the board voted for does feel, I don't know, disrespectful to the hours of deliberation in a way. And so I would be saddened to see that.
Okay. Sarah?
I would hope that our minutes reflect the range of our discussion and is this on? It doesn't sound like it's on. Would record our observations or opinions.
Yes. Okay. Irv?
Yeah, I mean, Bridget, I respect what you said, but, I would also like for you to go back and examine our policies on this. But the thing is that, as I preface, yes, because I am a school committee member, I support what the majority has agreed to and voted on. However, that does not mean that an individual member who has expressed a minority position cannot publicly state what they stated in a public meeting. So all I'm going, for me, I'm going to be only restating that which is going to be in the minutes and that which is going to be in the newspaper. So I take issue with that, it's a negative thing. I'm already saying that I support it because I'm a member of the school committee. However, I do wish to point out what's going to be in your minutes. What was my position? I see nothing wrong with that.
Jennifer?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All right, moved by Jennifer, Tillman. Irv,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Bridget,
Yes.
Jennifer,
Yes.
William,
Yes.
Anna,
Yes.
Deb,
Yes.
Tillman,
Yes.
and Sarah Bess. We are adjourned.
I'm so honored that you confused me with William.
I know, right? I feel like an adult beverage.
You can draft the,
I am not drunk.
Are all of these goals? Two tables.
Two tables.
No, that wouldn't work.
Are you going?
Sure.
Deb's never been to the archives.
Oh, I love it.
I know, right? Me too.
It's just,
Sure. And, you know, yeah, I appreciate that too. Well, and you know, I think Colin and Mickey really covered it well. And Mickey, she was introducing, it's like, she's got Rich and go through. You know, and on a number of levels, you know, because it's the impact on kids, it's the impact on people that we care about. You know, like I said, in some meeting at some point, like, we like the people we've got, we want to keep them, right? We do good work for us. We, you know, we go out of our way to find really good people, and we want to keep them. And, you know, this is a tough thing. And it's, you know, I mean, you know, even with the cuts, I mean,